What's up, Jets fans, and welcome back to a pre-draft night 2 episode of JetNation Live. We are your hosts, Dylan Tereman and Glenn Naughton, and as you can see down at the bottom of the screen, we do have a special guest, returning guest, our Friday host with Glenn, Chris Schubert from the Draft Network. He's here to give us all his insight on the newest New York Jet, Will McDonald IV. Glenn, how we doing tonight? And then Chris, how we doing tonight?
Doing good. Look, been enjoying a lot of the interaction. There are a lot of people. This McDonald pick clearly very polarizing. It wasn't something that a lot of people saw coming. I think for a large number of fans, it's a matter of name recognition. Like they didn't see this guy mocked to the Jets in a million different places, so now they're upset that the Jets took a guy that they weren't expecting. Really not the way to evaluate, but I kind of understand why some people are upset by it.
Doing great, gentlemen. Happy to be here. Happy to be getting closer and closer to another Jets pick that we can all talk about. And this is an interesting one. It has a lot of interesting layers to it. I think the biggest one, the philosophy of Joe Douglas and what he thinks by making this kind of pick, I think is the biggest thing. So wherever you guys want to go with this, I'm game. But yeah, an interesting pick and one that is going to be looked back on, I think, either very, very positively or very, very negatively very quickly, probably in the next year or two. That's how we're going to look at this.
Yeah, and I think that's the perfect place to start. And we'll just continue our offline conversation that Glenn and I were having right before you popped in. And that was the demeanor surrounding the war room for the Jets. Joe Douglas seemed to not be as enthusiastic as he has been in years past about the pick. Glenn acknowledged he's like his head was kind of down, looking a little, so like, okay, we just added another pass rusher. I think he looked really upset that the offensive line was kind of depleted at that pick. And then Robert Saleh, yeah, he streamed game wrecker, but it wasn't the sauce or the G dub that we got last year. So I don't know. We said last night live that they were desperately trying to trade back, and they said that in their press conference that they were looking to. I think that they would have loved to trade back, acquire more assets that they could that they lost in the Aaron Rodgers trade, and then make the selection still and get their guy. But they stuck and picked Will McDonald at 15. A lot of people, I watched your video earlier, Glenn. A lot of people seem to think that this is a bad pick or a reach just because it wasn't the consensus pick that you were talking about, Chris. And I think when you look at all the sites, and this isn't pointing fingers at the Draft Network or PFF or any of these guys, but just because their board is lined up a certain way does not mean that the draft has to fall that way. There's so many different opinions that go into this entire process, and the Jets could look at something completely different that another team does versus outside people. And I think the outside perspective is the hardest to grasp because we don't have that inside knowledge. So just because it doesn't align with everything that we think doesn't mean it's a bad pick. And Glenn, I'll let you continue your thoughts. And then Chris, you can just go ahead and give us all your entire thoughts on Will McDonald.
No, as I said, I talked about it in the video I did earlier. I think it's a good pick. I think they would have liked to trade back, but I do think that folks tend to kind of along the lines of what I said with the name recognition. People will often look at these guys and think, well, if Daniel Jeremiah didn't have him going in the top 15, this is a reach. If I didn't see someone, and I said, look, the Jets board is a Jets board. That's the board they're sticking to. They're not sticking to my favorite players or your favorite players or any mock draft favorite players. Like they're going to take their guys, and whether or not they would have liked to trade down doesn't mean they didn't take a player they don't like. Somebody said, oh, they didn't take the best player on the board. They took the best player on their board. They may not have taken the best player on the board you've got hanging in your bedroom, but that's okay. That's not what they're there to do. That's why they've got their scouts and their personnel department. We'll know in time if the pick worked out. But to say that it's a bad pick to me is, people say, oh, this doesn't make sense. It makes sense. You're in the AFC. You've got a ton of great quarterbacks to go through, and you're going to need guys to get to them. Your thoughts, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lens to look at this pick to make it make sense from the Jets' perspective. And I've been trying to tell everybody that has asked my opinion on it. If you look at it through the lens I'm about to present, the pick can make a ton of sense. Whether or not you agree with the player itself, the idea of what the Jets did by taking a pass rusher, taking an edge player, makes sense from this lens. Next offseason, Carl Lawson is going to be free agent. Bryce Huff is going to be a free agent, and they are bringing in a quarterback that they are going to have to pay a lot of money next year. And so money has to go someplace else. It can't go to the edge room. So when you make a pick like this, you are making a pick because, one, we know Robert Saleh and that San Francisco defense, we're going to rotate pass rushers. We're going to want to keep guys fresh in the third and fourth quarters, late in games when hopefully we have a lead with Aaron Rodgers. We're going to want to be able to put a ton of pressure on the quarterback. But also part two is they want to be able to go into next year, 2024, with year 3 of Jermaine Johnson, year 3 of Michael Clemens, JFM, Quinnen Williams, and then year 2 of Will McDonald. That is clearly what this is. And so when you look at it from that lens, it can make sense. My pushback would be, you better hope that you're the GM and the coach overseeing the team in 2024 before you start drafting for 2024, because we know the pressure that is going to be placed on this team. We know the expectations that are going to be placed on this team. I'll ask you guys this question. If the pick was Nolan Smith instead of Will McDonald, I think Jets fans are sitting here having the same conversation about Nolan Smith than they are Will McDonald, because it's a pass rusher. It's not an offensive tackle. It's not a wide receiver. It's not any of the other things that we talked about. So I don't want to get hung up on Will McDonald. His athletic scores are off the charts. He was put in that 4-eye position at Iowa State. They're going to move him to the wide 9, which I think is going to help him out a ton. So from that perspective, I can understand the pick. But the philosophy behind it, it's really tough for me to buy that this team was all in 15 minutes ago when they traded for Aaron Rodgers, and now all of a sudden we're making a pick because we're looking towards the future. It's just a very weird set of circumstances. And again, Glenn, this is exactly what we were afraid of with the pick swap, is you put yourself in the position of the New England Patriots messing things up for you from an offensive line perspective. Now, they didn't take the offensive lineman, but they invited the Pittsburgh Steelers up to do so. And that was the problem. The moment they did the pick swap, in my mind, it took them completely out of the offensive line conversation. And that's exactly how it played out on draft night.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw, there was pre-draft, there was an article that I saw from Todd, or that included a quote from Todd McShay saying that there were rumors that the Steelers were looking to move up in front of the Jets to get a lineman. And now just a few minutes ago, I saw a video that was tweeted out of a conversation after the trade or after the pick. Adam Schefter saying that generally for that swap would cost you the value of a third-round pick. The Patriots accepted the value of a fourth-round pick to let the Steelers move up. So they gave them a discount to go up and take the guy that a lot of people thought the Jets would take.
Can I touch on that part of it really quick? Because, again, it's Adam Schefter, and we don't know. We'll take the report at face value. But the idea that the New England Patriots took less to allow the Steelers to move up, right? Well, everyone's talking about, well, the Jets were eagerly trying to move out of the pick. Well, then they could have just done what the Patriots did and take a lesser value and just get out of the spot and figure it out and let a couple more picks roll off the board. They did stay in the spot. They ultimately decided to stay in the spot. So they weren't that eager to move out, because if they were that eager and they were frantically calling all over the place, guess what? They would have done what the Patriots did. They would have accepted a trade. And I want to make something very clear. And Glenn, I talked about this with you a couple of weeks ago. I am not going to overreact to one selection. They have another pick tonight, and there are a ton of offensive line talent still on the board. They can still get DeJuan Jones. They can still get Matthew Bergeron for the tackles. You got interior players like Joe Tippmann, John Michael Schmitz, Osiris Torrance, Cody Mock. All of those guys are still available potentially at 43. So let's not get too overreactionary here. Let's not go too overhyped. Let's just let the process play out. But I will say the eyebrow did raise, and I have considered the Jets one of the biggest losers after night one, because it just felt like a weird pick, all things considered, from a philosophy perspective. I think Will's going to be a fine player, but from a philosophy perspective, I have a tough time with it.
Yeah, I think I said to Dylan before we started that you and I did a show the other day in which I said one of the things I hate most about the draft is people who talk about the first-round pick as if it's the only pick. There are more picks coming. There's a round 2. There's a round 3. The Jets have picks in those rounds. I think that's where we see them address the offense. But just, Dylan, I don't know what your thoughts are on that when we get folks who treat the first-round pick as if it's the only pick.
Yeah, and I just want to circle all the way back real quick. Nolan Smith, I think Jets fans might have been more okay with it because it's a name brand player from Georgia that, everybody loved and this and that. But since it was a player that wasn't necessarily mocked in the top 15 consistently at the late end of the process, maybe they are a little bit more bummed about it. But and I'm sorry, Glenn, what was your question? I really just wanted to make that.
No, just your thoughts on the reactions. And I have had a few people say to me, I've had a few people say to me, well, why not Nolan Smith? If it was going to be edge, why not Nolan Smith? And my answer to that is it's the Jets board. It's not the public board. But yeah, your thoughts on how, so many people reacting to this pick as if it's the only pick.
Yeah. And we talked about Nolan Smith live right before we went, before the pick actually happened. And we thought we talked about edge rusher before, but yeah, come on, guys. We got 13 picks until our next pick or something like that, 13 or 14 picks. So there's plenty of players left on the board. I couldn't even fit it all in a tweet, and I'm not going to pay the $8 to fit more characters just to add more players. So I was getting tons of questions too, like, what about this player? What about this player? Yes, all of those guys. You really start looking at the board. There is such a good chance that John Michael Schmitz could fall to 43, no questions asked. Like Brian Branch, Joey Porter Jr., these guys I thought were locks to go in the first round. Obviously, Will Levis is like the big headline drama maker, but late in the process, he was going to every single pick. So it seemed like there was a little bit of smoke to a lot of that. So there's a ton of guys left. And I think the board is going to play out in a way where if you were sad last night, you could be very happy today, because I feel like it's a day-to-day thing with Jets fans. Like you said, Chris, we were all in. Even Jets fans were all in when they signed Aaron Rodgers the other day. Now so many are mad over this pick, and they're just like, we got to get off the fence. Like, this is a team that is a Super Bowl contender. And if they want to look to the future a little bit, 1 year, like you said, that's fine, because his impact in 2023 is going to be enough of an impact where he could have a better rookie season than Jermaine Johnson did. He could be better than Bryce Huff was, and he was the best pass rusher on our team last year. So all these outcomes could certainly happen. And like you said, moving from the 4-eye to the 9. So now you're playing from inside the tackle in college. Now you're out in space. They did that 3-by-1 alignment with their defensive front a lot, where they did a twist with the 3-man side and they had an isolated guy. Will McDonald has that isolated guy getting you bend off the edge. I mean, his arm length 90th percentile, his wingspan 80th percentile, according to Mock Draftable. I can pull up his spiderweb chart here. Sure, you don't love the weight at 3% or third percentile, excuse me, but you look at some of those names up top. Andre Carter was, highly touted in this draft class. Arnold Ebiketie was, somebody I liked in the process. Drake Jackson was somebody I liked last year in the process as well. So these are all guys that are going to be good in the NFL. And Will McDonald's probably the next one up. And I think we just got to trust the process more. It's not how our board aligned, and we were shocked, sure, but I think he's a damn good player.
If I can jump in here real quick, I think
Sure.
There's another interesting footnote that I took stock of last night that maybe could give us an inclination into what they're going to do tonight at 43. Will McDonald was a Senior Bowl player. The Jets were at the Senior Bowl last year as the coaches, and they put a heavy reliance on the Senior Bowl. Their first pick this year was a Senior Bowl guy. Guess what? John Michael Schmitz went to the Senior Bowl. Matthew Bergeron went to the Senior Bowl. DeJuan Jones went to the Senior Bowl. Cody Mock went to the Senior Bowl. I mean, if you want to connect those dots, those are 4 players that they would have gotten an up-close personal look, the same that they did with Will McDonald. Now, that doesn't mean every pick they make is going to be the Senior Bowl, but we have seen the priority that Joe Douglas has put on it last year and now even with the first-round pick this year. So that's something to keep an eye on. If those guys are available, that Senior Bowl connection, because they put a lot of stock into it, might be something to be paying attention to tonight when the Jets are on the clock. They should also trade down, by the way, just to be clear. They should trade down and pick up a 3rd-round pick.
They should have traded down last night. Didn't happen. Trade down tonight. Like, it's. I agree. I think
pick up a third. Pick up a 3rd-round pick. Do what you can to get a 3rd-round pick.
Even if it's a comp third, something.
Find a way. Get yourself in the top 100 again.
The weight from 43 to 112 is just going to be dreadful. But back to your Senior Bowl note, they had another coach. They had a running backs coach, Pat Bastian, down at the Senior Bowl again. So technically they doubled up the last 2 years having a coach on the field during practice. So they were up close. And obviously, every team meets with every prospect at the Senior Bowl. So they got a chance to meet with Will McDonald. Obviously, he might not have been a top 30 visit, but maybe they felt comfortable with him enough to take him just based off their Senior Bowl play. And Glenn, in your article, just breaking the news of the pick selection, you added a tweet of him beating Darnell Wright off the edge. Man, that was a nice move. And I remember people audibly saying things in the crowd during the Senior Bowl that day. And it was fun to watch. So I think people need to wait, watch the rest of this draft play out. Like you said, let's trade down a little bit, recoup a couple more picks so we have more to talk about from our perspective. But yeah, this board is falling in such a way, and we can just open it up from here.
But I have a question I want to throw out to you guys. I've talked about this. One of you guys mentioned John Michael Schmitz. We all like Schmitz. I like both. Whether it's him or Tippmann. But as Chris said, Schmitz was at the Senior Bowl. Jets met with Schmitz more than any other player. Have to imagine he's on their radar. But something that I brought up earlier was that of course, teams can talk all they want about how we're going to follow our board, but they have to have some type of idea of the framework, like where they're going to attack. And to me, I thought it was telling that they had all these meetings with Schmitz. And Connor McGovern was out there as a free agent all this time. And I think it might have been the day before, if not 2 days. I said, I think the Jets, if the guy they want at center doesn't fall to them, I think they might take a pass in the draft and bring Connor McGovern back. They end up bringing Connor McGovern back 3 days before the draft, but the same day they ship one of those second rounders to Green Bay for Aaron Rodgers. Is that the Jets saying, listen, we would have liked Tippmann or Schmitz with one of these twos, but either A, we don't think they're going to fall to us, or B, we're going to go in another direction with that pick now because we don't have two of them. Let's bring Connor back now so we've got a starting center. Or was that, I mean, either way, it makes sense. Is it just them saying we're going to bring Connor in as insurance, which was my thought previously, that maybe they bring him back if one of those centers don't fall to them?
Well, they loved Connor, right? And Connor was just a very steady hand for them. But also, let's remember, Connor made what, $9 million last year, and this year he's less than 2. So clearly, Connor
looks like he's is he frozen on you for you too there? Dylan, you're muted, Dylan.
I'm muted. He's frozen off the rails.
Yeah. Go to maybe go to the two here.
Yeah, we'll remove him until I see him start moving around again, and then we'll figure it out. No. So to your question, I think yes, I agree that probably is a nod in the direction of we're not going to take a center here at 43. However, I think it also was baked into did we think JMS was going to make it to pick 43? And perhaps that's not even their target, even though they had 4 pre-draft visits with him. So who actually knows at the end of the day? I'm starting to talk myself off of it. I'm a huge Keanu Benton guy, so I think they could go defensive tackle here. I know they passed up on.
You think they go D-line twice? First 2 picks?
So that's the thing is.
I love, and don't get me wrong, I love Benton.
Yeah,
and I wouldn't like if they made that pick. I'd be like, fans aren't gonna like that, but that is a nasty front 4. You know what I mean? Like that is monstrous front 4.
So yeah, I think it's probably going to get the same realm of reaction from fans is like, oh my gosh. But again, I think with like the Nolan Smith kind of conversation is we've kind of floated this out there to Jets fans before, so they're kind of more familiar with him. I don't think we've ever had a situation where Will McDonald was drafted mocked to the Jets where we could actually react to it in a way where Jets fans could maybe get more comfortable with him. So, but yeah, I think it's tough, but I would still do it if JMS was there. Chris, we'll let you get your thoughts back in now that you're unfrozen.
I was making such a good point, and my computer was like, "Nah, we're not."
That was great. That was. I was so into that. That was it. I was immersed in that thought. I was like, "This is the greatest moment in the history of the show."
Right, and then
frozen.
And then the computer. Yeah, I mean, of course,
terrible.
Long I haven't had a single problem. Where did I leave off? Where did it freeze for you guys? So I can.
You weren't that far. You weren't that far into it. You can start over again.
Okay, so I think when we look at this, right, they need to come out of this with a tackle, right? More so than an interior play, right? I think everybody feels that the interior of Laken Tomlinson, Connor McGovern, and Elijah Vera Tucker is a pretty nice group, right? They need a tackle. You got Dwayne Brown, who's about 40 years old. You got Mekhi Becton and Max Mitchell competing for the right side. That's the area that you need to beef up. So to me, JMS, I love him, would make a ton of sense, right? But you did bring back Connor McGovern on that 1-year deal. So to me, it feels like they might lean more towards, man, if we can get DeJuan Jones, if we can get Matthew Bergeron. Bergeron played both tackle spots in college, right? So he's had the ability to swing across depending on the needs. So to me, they walk into training camp with some combination of Dwayne Brown, Mekhi Becton, and Max Mitchell competing for those 2 tackle spots. That worries me. That scares me. That is a big weak spot for this team, I think, because if you expect Mekhi Becton to give you anything this season, I think that's a mistake. I love Mekhi. I love the talent. If he's on the field, we know what he can be, but I cannot guarantee that he's going to be on the field, so it's a big concern. So is everybody out here comfortable protecting Aaron Rodgers with Dwayne Brown and Max Mitchell next season? I don't think so. So to me, tackle's the big thing. And, that's the thing. They don't have as many picks. They can't maneuver as much. So this is going to really test Joe Douglas in a lot of ways because, to me, if both tackles are off the board, perfect opportunity to pick up the phone and trade back because then you're not leaving a tackle on the board. You trade back a couple spots. You pick up a third. Maybe you take one of these interior guys a few spots down, and then you can maybe take a safety, a linebacker, a receiver, one of those positions in the 3rd round. But to me, it would be a mistake if tonight ended and the New York Jets did not pick an offensive lineman with any of the picks that they currently have or that they will have by the night is over. I think it would be a mistake.
Now, you mentioned Bergeron being able to play both spots. I've talked about that, but I've also talked about Blake Freeland. He played left and right tackle at BYU, has the high RAS, which Joe Douglas seems to love. And then Cody Malk is a guy who, there are those who say he's going to be able to play everywhere. He's got the skill set.
He did it at the Senior Bowl.
Guards, tackles. So, I mean, to me, that kind of makes him the target because he gives you that depth in multiple spots. But that was the one reason Darnell Wright, as much as I liked him, he was the one guy I was leaning against because I think he was sort of the guy who was most locked into being able to play one spot. Whereas with Bergeron, with Freeland, with Mock, you're getting a guy who can play multiple positions.
I think Broderick would have been the dream. If I had to guess based on what the Jets would like to do, I think Broderick Jones would have been the ideal player. And the moment they traded at a 13, they gave up that opportunity. And that was it. It was over from that point because Paris was never going to get there. Darnell was never going to get there. Skoronski might have gotten there, but he ultimately went to Tennessee because I think they feel that they can move him anywhere along that line and feel pretty good about it. But Broderick to me always felt like the top option, but it was just never going to happen once they entered. They gave it to New England. Once they opened the door for New England to potentially take a tackle or trade the pick, it was over. So again, I understand the frustration. I understand the concern. We'll see what they do tonight, but I am. They're in a tough spot. Joe's really going to have to show his ability to maneuver around this draft tonight because it's going to be really telling. Now, if they stay in the spot and take a tackle, I'm not going to be upset.
Right, and they're one of 3 teams in the entire league that only have 1 selection tonight. So that's 2 rounds 2 and 3. I'm just going to shout out a couple of names, and then we can do a little round table about the offensive tackles. Just the names that we might not have mentioned, but some we have mentioned. Obviously, Bergeron, you both mentioned. Jalen Duncan, Blake Freeland, DeJuan Jones, Cody Mock, Warren McClendon, Jordan McFadden, Wanya Morris, Nick Saldiveri, Tyler Steen, Asim Richards. So all these guys are still on the board. Do any of those pique your interest at 43? I'll pass it to you first, Chris. Or do you think let's wait a little bit longer, like you said, try to trade down? Or
yeah, I mean,
one of them have to be a pick at 43.
There's a tier for me. DeJuan and Matthew Bergeron are in a top tier if I had to tier them, and then there would be a tier break. Saldiveri is somebody I think the league is going to love, and so I think he's going to hear his name pretty early. Those other guys you mentioned, I think, are late picks tonight, early picks tomorrow. But again, I asked the question: do the New York Jets, in the current window that they've put themselves in, want to be going into this season with 5th and 6th round players competing for opening day roster spots along the offensive line? Doesn't fit with that all-in nature of what they're doing. So, you know what, Frank? DeJuan Jones would be the guy for me. That guy would work. Him and Bergeron, they both would work. That's the dream. If you want the complete opposite of what last night felt for a lot of people it felt like a nightmare. You want the dream tonight, one of those 2 guys are on the board. When they watch, those guys will be on the board, and Joe will pick Josh Downs or something. Did you see this report that they were the team that was going to take Gibbs if the Lions didn't take him at 12?
That's got to be fake.
Can we do the round table on that real quick? Can we go around the horn?
Listen,
Let's get off the rails with that one real quick.
Listen, Dylan and I, I've said for years, take running backs late. You can get them at any point, which is true to a degree. Last year watching Breece Hall do his thing was kind of a wake up to me. Like that's mostly right. But if you can get an elite guy who's going to touch the ball more than anyone else you're getting, get that guy. So we talked about Gibbs at 42 because, there were mocks that had him going that late.
Yeah, he was never going to get there.
And we thought, maybe. And then I did see that. It was reported by 2 different places that the Jets were going to take him. I would have been equally shocked, but my goodness, him and Breece Hall in that backfield, forget about it. That would have been unbelievable.
Well, Brad Holmes also mentioned 15 in his press conference. That's where it originally came from. He mentioned that they didn't think he was going to get there to 18. And you do the math, you look at who's available behind them.
Right.
Like who would have been the guy to take him? And then they said the Jets. And I look at it from this perspective. Jahmyr Gibbs is probably the best pass catching back in this draft class. That's the difference that he provides to you. He is a very good receiver out of the backfield. So to me, we know that the Jets were kind of messing around with the idea of getting another wide receiver, right? Everyone's like, oh, JSN at 15, at 13, even take him. So the idea of adding a playmaker, and again, we don't know exactly when Breece is going to be back this season. And Michael Carter didn't necessarily inspire confidence at the second half of last season. So I could get there, and it could make some sense for this year's team, but I would have been equally as puzzled. When I saw that, I was like, you're kidding me. Joe Douglas just out here being like, you know what? Load me up. Just give Aaron Rodgers all the targets he can get. Just give me 15 guys. I'm not even going to play with offensive linemen. We're going to put more receivers on the field.
Well, listen, last year, the thing that stood out to me, I believe it was after the Garrett Wilson pick when there was, jubilation and celebration in the war room. And I remember Joe Douglas just grabbing Robert Saleh and saying, playmakers. Like, that stuck with me. Like, they want guys who can get the ball and take it to the house. And that's a guy who can do that. So if that's where the emphasis is, we hear teams talk all the time about how it's these explosives. You got to have the explosives in today's game. You got to have guys who are a threat to score. That's what Jahmyr Gibbs would have been. I mean, there's not another guy like that in this class, but there are some really good backs. Like we've talked about Israel Abanikanda, who is a big time runner. Tank Bigsby, who I don't think gets enough attention. Zach Charbonnet. Charbonnet's not the sub 4-4 guy, but he can do everything, and he can do everything well. So
he's going to go early tonight. I think
I think he's a second rounder. If they were looking at Gibbs there, again, move down, get some picks, take a back, get a tackle, get Freeland, get Bergeron. But I mean, they can't ignore the O-line. But I love the idea of another game breaker somewhere. And there's a lot of guys out there. There's still some really good tight ends on the board too.
I'm fascinated by this.
The Jahmyr Gibbs thing is just hilarious because that's the first I heard of it. I didn't see any of those reports. So yes, my initial reaction is hell yeah, I would have taken him at 15. Not because I like him more than Will McDonald, but for all the reasons that you said. He's such a great pass catcher. Mm-hmm. When you go back and watch the Green Bay Packers to like watch your Aaron Rodgers stuff, Aaron Jones is in the slot a ton. Like he's running those outside fades like all the time. So I like it. He's that one cut go 80 yards, just like Brees. I think he could hold the fort down if Brees isn't 100% for the first 2-3 weeks or what have you. I know it's trending in the direction that he would be healthy, but yeah, let's just get dynamic playmakers. In our impromptu mock the other night, it did come down to Josh Downs and Darnell Washington at 43. And then I scrolled all the way up and Jahmyr Gibbs was hiding there at number 36 ranked at the 43rd pick. And we were like, well, we didn't expect him to be here, but that opens up a whole can of worms if he is. So maybe 15 is a little rich in like the team building philosophical aspect of it, but hell yeah, man, that would have been awesome. And so yeah, those reports kind of make me a little sad, but a little excited that maybe they do try to take like a Roshan Johnson in this draft because he's of that mold. He's a pass catcher. He's a runner. He's a pass protector. He can do everything. I think Rodgers would like somebody that can do all three things out the gates. So I'm excited to hear that, but it'll be interesting for sure to see when they take a playmaker.
Yeah, and I'm biased towards Josh Downs of the remaining players.
And that's what I took in the mock.
That's the guy.
Downs and Charbonnet there are a handful of guys in this year's class who I've been talking about since last year. And Downs was one of them. Jordan Addison was another one. Charbonnet is a guy. Love both those players. Again, you can go through the list of running backs in this class and find the 8th, 9th, 10th guy and think I would be happy with that guy. Because there are a bunch of dudes. But again, Israel Banakanda is one. I'm not sure about his contact balance. He's so good and so explosive. The guy had so many big runs where nobody laid a hand on him. And you think, well, how often can you rely on that happening at the pro level? Like he's going to have to take some shots. Can he maintain his momentum when that happens? That remains to be seen. But there, again, tight ends like Michael Mayer. I think he goes before 43. To me, the guy like last year I said it about Jordan Davis. This year, Darnell Washington. Like these are guys I think that people are going to look back at and say, how did he not go sooner? Because Washington's going to be a nightmare. He's going to be a matchup nightmare, and he's an extra offensive lineman. So if you're the Jets and you're going to take another game-breaking running back at some point, and when Darnell Washington is on the field, you've essentially got a third tackle. Like he's a guy who teams are going to have to game plan for because of what a pain he's going to be. And again, deep tight end class, Will Mallory, another guy. He'll go much later. I don't think he'll be a factor today. But how do you guys feel about the tight ends?
I'll tell you this, Glenn, when they were picking at 15, everybody in, at our content house here was like, Chris, what do you want them to do? And I'm like, folks, I got to tell you, if there's not an offensive lineman on the board, I have no idea. And sure enough, we got to last night and 15 rolled around and there wasn't an offensive lineman on the board that I liked. And I was like, here we are. We are in the exact scenario that I've been talking about for 3 months now that has scared the crap out of me. And they ended up, doing what they did. Well, I got to tell you, they got picked 43 tonight. I feel the same way. If they don't get an offensive lineman, I have no idea what they're going to do. I don't feel any closer to being able to figure that out. When you mentioned the tight ends, Glenn, I've talked to you about Luke Musgrave. That's my guy. He's my favorite tight end in this class. I think that athletic profile is huge. Does he get to 43? I don't know. Only one tight end going in the first round does complicate things a little bit. I mean, think about it from this perspective. Cam Smith, Keely Ringo, Joey Porter Jr., Julius Brents. That's just a corner position guys that are still left on the board. Michael Mayer's still left on the board. All the interior guys are still off the board. Will Levis is still off the board. So the board could, I think, better than it did yesterday, play into the Jets' hands a little bit. What they do when they're on the clock, I think after Will McDonald was the pick at 15 last night, anybody's guess how Joe Douglas has this board stacked this year. Anybody's guess.
Yeah, and I think I would take Michael Mayer at 43, just like I would take Darnell Washington at 43. But outside of that, I really have a hard time convincing myself that that's the route they're actually going to take. Now, you could just convince me by saying, or push me to thinking that by saying Nathaniel Hackett likes taller receivers, and we want a bigger guy in the slot, maybe a tight end in the slot. So I don't know if that's necessarily the route they do go ultimately, but I do like some of the names. I'd prefer if they, like we've been saying, trade down and try to get somebody in that middle range. But if they even wait till like 112, I think they can get some good players like Brenton Strange, Luke Shoemaker, who they had in for a visit, I think could be there in that 4th round range. Zach Kuntz from Old Dominion, he's a really athletic player, high RAS score, so maybe somebody takes a chance on him in the top 100. But in that 4th round range, I think that's where we should start swinging for a tight end, and then your guy Glenn Payne Durham. I think he's also.
Glenn, love that shout with the Payne Durham. Love that.
Yeah. He was one of my guys I named during the year. We do weekly prospect watch, and he was one of my guys early on.
Yeah, so I definitely don't hate. Sorry.
No, I'm so worried. I just thought about this because Glenn and I have talked about this position so many. Like, Glenn, I think our dream of like Deion Henley is just out the board. It's just not going to happen tonight. Like, it's out. It's over.
I'm leaving.
We're not getting him now. Like we talked about it being a potential option here. But
I know.
Afterward, it's just we can't be going down this path.
They got to trade down, add picks, get him at 48 or something.
I know. It's exactly what I'm talking about.
That's gonna hurt. Whoever takes him, man, that's gonna be. Rough.
You know what's gonna hurt even more? It's gonna be an AFC East team, and you and I are.
No. I said it the other day. Like there's like the guys you love, not only when you don't take them, but when they end up in your division, and it's like it's God. 100%. He's been somewhat of a disappointment, but I remember with what's his name, the Gesicki. I was like, man, that guy's gonna be a matchup nightmare. Just don't let him end up in the AFC East. And he's been up and down, but he just was such a freak. I thought, he's going to be a nightmare for years. Good player. But, yeah, Deion Henley, man. If
we can – Deion Henley. I feel like for Glenn's mental health, it's probably better that Deion Henley doesn't become a Jet so that he doesn't, stress this much about it. But, yeah, no.
Deion's a Jet. We'll be fine. It'll be good.
We will prosper 100%.
Yeah, we'll be fine.
But you mentioned that. Go into AFC East teams, and we can just kind of wrap it up from here. The Patriots got Christian Gonzalez, and the Buffalo Bills got Dalton Kincaid. The Miami Dolphins don't have a pick yet. How do we feel about those? I think
how do we feel? How did we let the New England Patriots get Christian Gonzalez? NFL teams. How did we let that happen? They traded out of 14, and we still let them get probably the best.
Imagine trading down and getting that guy.
How do we do that?
That's
I will
crazy.
tell you, in my predictive mock, I had them taking Christian at 14, but that's the way the board fell for me. I didn't think the league was actually going to let it happen. It's unbelievable to me.
I was so convinced that he was going to go before even the Jets pick, even before when they had 13. I was so convinced, and that was definitely a shocker for me. Dalton Kincaid was a big shocker to me. I thought he was going to be a Green Bay Packer. And I don't know, it was kind of weird watching the Brandon Beane talk to him on the phone. Like he was just super calm about it again, but maybe I haven't watched enough Brandon Beane, but I think that's a really exciting one. It kind of makes it weird because they're going to be a lot of 12 personnel with Dawson,
which they don't do.
Right,
they don't
exactly.
do 12.
It's brand new for them. And I mean, maybe that's something for Gabriel Davis that he has to worry about his, play time being diminished. But I don't know who their wide receiver 3 is currently. Maybe Cole Beasley is their third guy. I don't know, but
it's tough that they can't run the ball. Like they're going to have to run the ball at a 12 to be able to make it successful when they run the passing sets out of it. And they can't run the ball very well unless it's Josh running around making plays. So that was a weird one for me. He's a good player, and I think he's going to be good for them. But they're going to have to do something that they've never really done before. I can see the path where it works, and he's a good player for them, and they need offensive weapons. But, man, it just feels like it might take them a little bit to get that in motion. And for a team that is trying to break through in the AFC, they need players that can help them immediately.
Yeah. All right. Last question. We can wrap it up because we're running over a little over 6 now. We're less than an hour away from the kickoff of round 2.
Are we really? I'm so lost. I don't know what time. I didn't sleep.
56 minutes. Yeah, we got 56 minutes until Deion Henley goes to Buffalo Bills.
Yeah.
God,
I don't know where Chris is located, but it's 5 after 6 Eastern time. So
no, and I don't know what time it is.
I'm gonna throw a name out there. Glenn, we're gonna make a face probably, and Chris, I want to hear your reaction. If he's there at 43, do you take him? Yes or no? I think no matter what, they should have taken him anyway. Brian Branch, what are your thoughts?
No.
I love Brian.
Same.
It makes sense. We got other things we got to worry about here. We need offensive line help or a receiver. Yeah. I would even take a receiver before I would take a safety.
Okay. All right. Glenn,
and I love Brian.
I heard your reaction in there. Is there a specific wide receiver that we haven't touched on yet. I think Cedric Tillman is a guy to watch.
Yeah.
Jalen Hyatt's still available on the board. Anybody that sticks out to you, Chris, and then we'll really get out of here.
2 names to keep an eye on, maybe not for the Jets, but we'll go earlier than people think tonight. Marvin Mims, Oklahoma, and Tyler Scott, Cincinnati would be 2 names that I would keep an eye on to go earlier than people think tonight. I think those 2 guys the league is going to really love, and I had to get a mid-major guy in there with Tyler Scott at the end of the show.
What about Charlie Jones, man? He was a guy that I brought up. He was one of the names I mentioned during the season because I forget who it was against. I watched him have one game, and he just had this monster game, and I was like, well, this guy's worth watching. And he's like every week, 150 yards. He just kept doing it over and over again. It's like this guy's something else. Like he just kept producing, and he kind of entered the conversation as a day 2 pick.
Well, you've got A.T. Perry in there as well, who could potentially go. You have Tank Dell. That's going to be a fascinating evaluation to see what the league does with that. Rasheed Rice, that's another name. I mean, you got still a lot of guys that this is kind of the range in which they'll go. So I'll be fascinated to see what that ultimately looks like tonight at that position.
And then you have the ultimate Jaden Reed still sitting there.
I was going to say, you haven't mentioned Jaden Reed yet, Dylan.
Michael Wilson, Stanford kid, right?
Yep.
Another
one.
I had to save the best for last, Glenn. You know me. Come on.
Xavier Hutchinson. I'm just thinking of Senior Bowl guys. Xavier Hutchinson.
I know it's kind of a reach maybe, but yeah, I think so.
Andre Yasevich, the Princeton receiver. As
well.
I mean, those are all guys that I think are in play tonight in some capacity.
100%. And if you're looking slot at some point, Demario Douglas out of Liberty, smallish guy, but I prefer Tank Dell. And I said the other day, like I wanted JSN. Yeah, I wanted JSN for that quickness, that his ability to get open in a hurry. But I said if the Jets don't go JSN, maybe you go Tank Dell later on. And to me, it's sort of like Tank Dell and Douglas are 2 guys in that same class, though Dell, a bit more explosive.
You want quickness. Tank Dell provides that for you.
Yep.
Absolutely. All right. So for Glenn Naughton, you can follow him on Twitter at AceFan23. Follow his draft account on Twitter at JetsPicks, at JetsPicks. He has tons of clips coming. Probably every Jets pick, every UDFA player that the Jets get, he'll have a clip up there for you. You can follow Chris Schubert and all of his work over at the Draft Network and follow him on Twitter at @ChrisSchubert_. Guys, we're here, round 2. We only got 1 pick. Let's hope it turns into more. We'll be back, Glenn and I, to recap everything. I'm not sure what you got cooking, Chris, but you can plug that real quick at the end of the show.
Yeah, we're doing a live show tonight on our YouTube channel. We're hanging out for the entirety of night 2, breaking down all the picks. So if you're looking for analysis, you're looking for a nice second screen experience, we got you as well. And obviously listen to my good friends here while they break down stuff as well.
Absolutely. I'm a big fan of DP and Keith Sanchez over there. So love what you guys got cooking over there. And we appreciate you coming on. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We love all the comments. We'll be back to break it all down for you. And in the meantime, happy drafting and let's go Jets.